Hello, hopefully this is all working. So good to be back. Happy New Year to you all. I hope you're having a good 2022 so far. Yes, and I suppose while we're on it, has anybody got any New Year's resolutions or any things that they've started? I would love to hear what your New Year's resolutions are so that I can see. We can follow each other, see how we're getting on with what we plan to do, and hopefully continue making resolutions all the way through the year. As some of you may know, I'm not a huge New Year's resolutions person myself. I do think that, as Professor Arguella said in his last video, that there is definitely something to be said about a tradition that people start a new thing at the start of a new year. It's kind of as you see all these things, a sort of a fresh book almost of 365 pages that you can sort of plan something, and it's a nice sort of easy start date for something. I get why it's popular, and I understand it. My only thing is that I like some traditions, but some things I think that it's good for us to just start something when we want to start something. So for me, sometimes quite purposely, I will start something on a Wednesday, a random day of the year. And I actually find that works pretty well. So I quite like academic years as well, because it's kind of not the start of the year in the part of the world where I grew up and studied. So they started, it's kind of September time. But I would do things just randomly whenever they come up, really, to be honest. And I find that just getting back into things as and when I can, when I'm ready, is absolutely fine. And I sometimes don't even remember the date that I started something. So there you go. But this last couple of weeks, I've been meeting with a lot of people about language learning, and I have really enjoyed doing that. It's been, for me, a lot of fun to talk to lots of people and to see what kind of the questions are that come up. So as some of you may know, I have been offering this opportunity to study with me in the new year, and I've not started it yet because so we have the traditional Christmas celebrations here on the 6th and the 7th of January. So we do both. We celebrate Christmas like with the UK style on the 25th, and then also the Macedonian Christmas, which is on the 6th, which is we call Badnik, which is like Christmas Eve with a traditional meal, and then we share a bread together. And then on the 7th is Christmas Day. So I will start doing all these things after that date. Now, my plan, because I got an awful lot of people wanting to study with me, and because this is something that obviously I don't have that many hours in my day or my week to be able to do. So what I'm looking at doing now is setting up some groups or some triage sessions where I will make myself available to answer very specific questions for people. So if you are interested in that kind of thing as well, and you haven't signed up to study with me, I can see if I will set those things up. Just let me know what kind of things in the comments, just write in the comments what kind of things you're interested in, and feel free to send me a message, and I can see if I can add you to sort of a mail out list if I come up with more sort of generic groups that I set up where you can just come in and join and ask questions. Feel free to let me know. So I will look to do that probably around the 10th of January. But during these meetings, there are a few things that have come up for me again and again. And a lot of it is to do with sort of making good use of your teacher, especially sort of like italki type teacher. And I think maybe that would be a good thing to go into with a sort of a special presentation and maybe a blog post just to write how I do this. Now, over the past 3 weeks, roughly, I've been doing my challenge for Swahili, and a number of you will have noticed that I have all of my lessons go online after my classes. So I record them with Glory, and then when I finish the class, I go through. I just top and tail the recording, or if there's something that happened in between, like the internet cut out or something, I try and make it a bit tidier, and then I put it online, basically as I had the lesson. And the reason I'm doing that is kind of twofold. The first one, obviously, is because I'd love to see more people learning African languages. I think there are some great languages out there. Swahili was actually suggested to me by the people because it was a language that was prevalent. There's quite a lot of resources for it. It's on Duolingo, and it seemed like a good idea on Duolingo, which is why I thought, okay, I'll go for that one. It gives me the chance to try Duolingo again as well. And so it's been a really good experience generally. So that was the first reason to pick an African language, because I think sometimes they feel like they get overlooked in the language learning community, and I wanted to actually see what it was like to study one myself, because I realized that I hadn't really studied an African language, and I wanted to. So I've been to Africa, and I really enjoyed going there, and I did get enticed and intrigued by some of the languages, and I did buy some books while I was there as well. I bought one on Shona, and I bought some on Tswana, and I bought some on Zulu and on Xhosa. And so I would love to learn more African languages in the future. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get into Swahili and then also move on to some others in the future too. Now, when it comes to studying these African languages and doing it on Duolingo, but also on italki, what I wanted to do also was to show you how I go about these lessons. So obviously, I think it's sort of self-explanatory when I talk about this on Duolingo, because I just follow the tree. And I mentioned last week that I've actually found what I'm doing to make quite a lot of sense for Swahili. So the sort of words generally and the patterns that I'm learning make a lot of sense. I mentioned that I hadn't really seen much of in the way of an explanation, and that's because I haven't been on it was suggested that because I hadn't been on the computer, the website version, but rather on the app. I have only still been on the app because I can't remember my password, so I would have to reset it. And anyway, I've just carried on just doing it because I get the explanations with Glory anyway. So I'm continuing to go through it, and I find with this still that there are some words that I have to learn to be able to get past the levels and to make them this lovely purple color, which is like kind of a mastery of the it's called legendary in Duolingo is the terminology they use, but it's kind of like a mastery of a certain topic, and it takes quite a while to go through all of the levels to get to this. But by that time, you do know the words. What I do find is that some of the words are absolutely bizarre for me to be learning right now. I mean, were I in Tanzania or Kenya or somewhere where they speak Swahili, maybe the word for a mosquito net would be useful. At the moment, chandarua, which is the word for mosquito net in Swahili, is a bit weird to be learning. Learning some of the typical sort of like ugali, for example, which is like a typical food that you eat in that part of the world, which I think in some places is called like pop or something like that as well. That's how it sounds when it's described to me. I think that's fine because okay, I'm not eating ugali myself at the moment because I don't have access to it and I can't make it. But that kind of thing is fine. But I think like mosquito net and words like a sapling, a seedling of a tree, which is unche, I find it are interesting, but yeah, not necessary. Maybe another word that I've learned that today or yesterday was Kisima. Kisima is the word for a well. Kisima cha maji is a water well. Don't know how useful the word for a well is, really. And I kind of think maybe that's to do with having to look at classes of nouns. So my guess is that they've chosen words that are easy to follow with noun classes in Swahili, because Swahili has sort of, you change the start of a word to make things positive plural. So for example, the word for a knife is kisu, the word for knives is visu. So you change the K for a V, and then you have, it works in different ways depending on the noun class. So kitabu is a book, vitabu are books. Things like mwalimu is the word for a teacher, and walimu is the word for teachers. So you can see this one has sort of a mwa, it turns to a wa. You take the M away and you're left with walimu. So depending on the noun class, you have a different approach. So of how to form plurals, and it also affects the possessive pronouns, and it also affects some of the verbs, from what I see at the moment as well, to a degree. So there are a number of things that sort of that are affected by this. It's not hugely amazingly explained in Duolingo for me, but as I say, having the extra classes with Glory really helps to sort of make it come together. Now, when it comes to studying a language, I find that, and this is one thing I've sort of said to a number of people I've spoken to, you have to be very honest with yourself what you want. So if you want a specific thing out of a language that you want to speak, and you're not speaking, if you think of this in terms of mathematics, if you put 0 in, you get 0 out. So not to sort of do the owl, the Duolingo owl, but you put 0 in, you get 0 out. And it's amazing how sometimes I think we expect something to happen when we don't do something. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that. You need to sit down and do things to get something out of it. And I heard this said, and it was hinted at as well, actually, in a book that Professor Aguas was referring to in his last video that I saw just this morning. And it's true. It's sort of, it can be good just to promise that you're going to do a small amount in the beginning. So you say, for example, I'm going to do 5 minutes or whatever you do. I think he mentioned 3 minutes, but I've also heard people say 5 minutes. And if you say to yourself, I'm going to do 5 minutes, you'll often find that you will do a bit more than that. And as long as you start with something like that a day, instead of like just going crazy with, I don't know, crazy times that you say, I'm going to start waking up at like 3 a.m. and study, or I'm going to start doing something like maybe 5 hours a day, from 0 to 5 hours. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that well, because it's this huge change that you make to your studies and to your life that isn't necessarily something you can continue doing in the long term. So I would definitely recommend doing making yourself smaller promises. I do find that if you are studying and you have like some more serious sessions, and when I say more serious sessions, that would be where you sit down and you really analyze a text. So you have maybe in your book, or in your, if you're studying with a course or whatever you're using to study your study materials, you don't just read the text, but you also analyze it. You read it out loud, you maybe record it, you maybe get feedback on your pronunciation from a speaker of the language, whether that's a teacher or a friend or whoever it may be. And if you have a recording of it as well, even better, because you compare it yourself. So you compare your recording to the recording of what you've got. But then you also look at the actual words used, the grammar used, and start to analyze it as well. Look at, okay, why is that used here? Are there any things that you don't know? Are there things that you could change in the text? Sort of take this word out, put this word in. If you wanted to explain something a bit different, is there a way you can make the changes to the text to make it say what you wanted to say? Is there something that explains your situation? Where, for example, in a dialogue, they're talking about the weather being sunny, but actually where you are, it's rainy and foggy. Do you have that vocabulary to be able to manipulate the language in that way? What I see is that with these different, with these different texts, really, what they do is they give you lots of patterns that are in the language, and these patterns will often fit many different things that you'd want to say. And these are the things that we learn naturally anyway in our first languages, which is why in a language like English, children will very commonly overuse a rule. So, I talk, I talked, I wash, I washed. We will see the ed ending, and children will very quickly learn, okay, you just have this d at the end of the verb, and you basically you go from what you did in the present, what you do in the present, to what you did in the past. So, but then they'll come across a verb like I see, and instead of saying I saw, they will say I seed, or I run, I runned. Very often they will come across these patterns and just overuse them, and we understand them. And as adults with children, we will just simply correct back and say to them, "Oh, yeah, you ran," or "Oh, you saw it," and we do this in a very natural way as we're growing up. But the thing is that natural ability that's in us all to see patterns in language and to be able to look at text with those eyes, or to hear speech in that way, is a very useful tool when it comes to language learning, because it means that we can actually expand that with our second languages too. And sometimes we'll see and we'll notice and we'll be corrected, and sometimes we'll see differences where it doesn't quite fit. But those patterns are really important to be able to start actually using language in an active way. And what I mean by an active way is there are kind of, we talk about often, listening and reading, which tend to be more passive skills, things that you do, that sort of, they happen and wash over you and you understand more. And then you have these active skills of speaking and writing, where you're actually producing the language yourself. And in order to produce language, you need to have some sort of template that you can help you to know and feel confident in what you're writing. When I was at school studying French and Spanish literature, we would write about the books. Even in English, we would do similar things, but in French and Spanish, it was more noticeable. We would write about the books, and what we'd have is set phrases that we would use, and then we would plug into things we wanted to argue or citate, sort of to cite, or to or points we wanted to make with proof from within the text of the stories, or and we would use these basically as sort of ready-made phrases. And really, when we speak, I mean, that's what we do. We just end up with so many of them, so many of these patterns, so many of these things, so many of these elements. And this is why people talk about comprehensive reading and extensive listening, or it's because you hear more and more of the patterns, and you hear them over and over again. The most common ones, particularly, you hear and read over and over again because they're more commonly used. And what happens is you get so many of them that they just become automatic in your ability to speak the language, and they no longer feel or seem like patterns in the same way as before, because you can manipulate them so effortlessly that they just sort of seamlessly glide together to make conversation. And this is that kind of magical moment when we get to that point and we feel them just coming together like this. That's when we have not just one point, actually. To be fair, we have a number of points where this happens, and at different levels. But when that starts to happen, you feel this kind of eureka moment, I've got it, I know it, okay? And you can start saying a lot of things together, you know? And then you get it again, kind of an intermediate stage, where you sort of can say a lot more stuff, and even more complex patterns come in. And then you get it at this very advanced stage where basically nothing is holding you back at all. You feel very, very confident in being able to express yourself in the new language. And this is kind of where we want to get. The way to get there is to practice these things with your language partners, with your teachers, with whoever. And the key to doing it in a step-by-step way is to take the vocabulary that's important to you. So, you know, there's no point learning lots and lots of vocabulary and lists of reams of things about things that have got nothing to do with you. For example, if you don't have a sister, but you have a brother, prioritize brother, because you're going to use it more often. If you know other people that do have sisters, you're going to naturally hear that, and they're talking about them all the time. So you will pick up on these words. I mean, that's a very basic example, but I would say probably a better example might be types of work. For example, if no one in your family or in your friends group is an architect, you may not necessarily learn the word for architect first, unless it's a particularly similar word from like a Latin language or something. Typically, you would prioritize learning words that are relevant to your life and your circles and your existence, and then you would move on beyond those to other words, because you'd hear them naturally when you meet other people. That's kind of how it's always worked for me, and then that's how I also prioritize things when I come to a lesson. You may see from the lessons I've been having with Glory, she's mentioned a few times about me knowing the numbers. I'll be honest with you, numbers are not something I would usually prioritize, simply because, first of all, who am I going to use numbers with in most conversations? The numbers I might use are my age, my daughter's age, my wife's age, maybe, I don't know. But you know, how long I've been learning the language, or maybe a few things like that I might use, like a few numbers. But numbers are not that important if you're not using them for anything. If I were in Tanzania and I was speaking to people and looking at prices and asking after prices, then yeah, okay, I may have more cause to use numbers. At the moment, not so much. I have been learning them slowly, but I haven't prioritized them. So when I say, and I didn't think they were important, I don't mean they're not important at all. They're obviously, numbers are important, but I haven't made them my priority to learn first. I've just let them sort of gradually seep in, and I get them wrong, still get them wrong. I don't worry that I get them wrong. I'm quite happy to be getting them wrong, even though some of them, especially when you get into the sort of the 20, 30, 40 type numbers, they're very much like Arabic. And so they are quite easy to sort of understand when I see them, but I don't necessarily retain them all in an active way. And I think that there are certain things that you know you will say, know you will need to say and understand, and there are other things that you naturally know, okay, it's not going to be that useful. Like the examples I gave to you from Duolingo. I mean, okay, I mean, I happen to like gardening. I like plants. I like nature. I enjoy talking about things like that generally. And if I can speak to somebody else who enjoys gardening, then I'm very, very happy to talk about plants and things like that. And how I propagate things, and how I take cuttings, and these are things that I do like to talk about. I mean, not for hours and hours, but enjoy talking about them. So I possibly will use them, and maybe they are naturally more interesting to me, but they're not, again, it's not language that I would prioritize, because I still can't say very basic things in Swahili. I mean, the level I'm working towards now is A1.1. It's not even full A1, it's A1.1. It's the very start of A1. So it will take me a while to get to the point where I'll be talking about cuttings, or talking about plants or saplings or things like that. So yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment with Duolingo and with Swahili. I feel that actually Duolingo isn't doing a bad job with me. It does feel like it takes a long time to get what I need in terms of what I feel I would naturally prioritize for my language learning. So we're talking about over an hour a day just on the app, right? And that's a long time to be spending on the app to really not know that I can't say so much. I can say quite a few things, but I can't say so much. And it's not always the things that I would want to naturally say. But it's not bad. It's really not that bad. And I think that if I didn't have the lessons with Glory, I don't think it would be as effective. It's the fact that I use and use lessons with Glory to practice what I'm doing and to manipulate and to play and to ask questions. That's the kind of the real clincher, and it's because I'm doing it, twice a week. I always think that if you're learning a language, you need to have at least a couple, if not three or more, times where you touch base with somebody, whether it's like for a study session or a lesson or something where you're actually going a bit deeper into it and forcing yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. I think that's important, especially when you get to the intermediate stages. And I've spoken to a number of people as well where they've got to this kind of intermediate stage and they want to improve, but it's very comfortable to continue talking about the same types of things. Like when you get to this intermediate level where you've had that feeling, you've meshed a lot of things together and they've come together, what happens is you end up being able to speak about very similar things to lots of people with a lot of confidence, and your confidence grows because you can now say it more quickly, you can understand maybe a bit more, but you still don't feel that you're making headway into the next higher levels of the language. And that's simply because you're not being pushed. You're basically, you talk to maybe the same people or similar people each time about similar topics. And what happens is they get used to talking to you as well. So therefore, what they do is they meet you at your level, and they're also tailoring their language, often not consciously, but subconsciously. They will do that. I will do that for people as well when I speak. If I speak to somebody in a language that I speak well, and I am speaking to a learner who's just learning, or somebody who's just around about intermediate level, I will often tailor my language to meet their level so that the conversation and communication moves forward, because otherwise it can get very frustrating for the speaker and also for the listener to do that. So yeah, it's a bit of a difficult situation, but you definitely need, if you want to move forward, we need to force ourselves out of our comfort zones, look for things that are interesting to us, yes, but also look for things that have words and things that will force us to talk about things that are actually a little bit challenging. At the moment, for me with Swahili, I'm nowhere near that stage. I'm still at the very beginning, and it will take time to get anywhere near there. I don't even know if I will at the end of this challenge. My classes will start again in January this month, in a few weeks, a couple of weeks actually. And at the moment, I'm working a lot on my Celtic languages, just because I wanted to do that when COVID hit and I got opportunities to study. But yeah, here we go. 1 hour is not enough when you learn a language as different from your own Swahili, I think, especially at the beginning. Yeah, it's 1 hour a day on the app, but then also I meet with Glory, and I'm saying that's one hour minimum. So it's usually more than an hour that I'm doing a day, and then also I'm doing the talks with Glory in addition to that. So it's not a bad amount of time. If you go too fast with it, what can also happen is you can forget things very quickly. So when you move very, very quickly with a language, you can feel like this huge boost, right? That you get to use it. But if you're not constantly reviewing what you're doing, you find that because it's all very new material, you often lose it just as quickly as you learned it. So you end up with a lot of vocabulary that you've seen, but you also end up with a lot of vocabulary that doesn't stay in your long-term memory. And so what I'm trying to do is actually keep, and because Swahili is different to the other languages I speak, it's got some similarities to Arabic, of course, in its vocabulary. But the reason why I take it at that pace is because, first of all, for many people who work, I want to try and do something that's more representative of something that, you know, people who are working. And so 1 hour a day, I think, is probably plenty to be doing. If you are doing it full time, then 4 hours, as you suggest, or 6 hours. Wow, 6 hours, that's 6 hours a day is a full-time job. So not many people can do that. It would be a wonderful thing to do if you maybe in the country. When I was in Germany, I definitely did that. I basically treated learning German as a full-time job, but I was in Germany and I was constantly repeating the vocabulary. So it was a very different feel. And when I did my Estonian challenge, I did as well. I did about 4 or so hours a day of Estonian during the summer for a month, and actually for 2 months in the end. And again, it was a lot more concentrated, and I was having lessons more regularly, and I was making an Estonian environment where I was. That's not always possible. You will notice, though, that with what I'm doing now with Swahili, I definitely feel that I'm moving forwards with it. And that's important. That feeling of going forwards with a language is really important. How fast you go is depends on what your goals are. But if you at least feel that you are making progress, that's important because it keeps you motivated to move on. So I would definitely encourage you to do enough to make it feel like you're not having huge gaps, and that you therefore forget what you're doing, because when you start having those feelings, it's really easy to start feeling demotivated and you don't move forward. But thank you so much for your input, John. I really appreciate it. Let me see. Chanel, you can give me a link to Swahili Pod. I've got one, Chanel. I actually have Swahili Pod, and I plan to listen to it more probably after this challenge, just so that I keep up with some Swahili. I am looking at what I do with Duolingo. At the moment, I'm just at starting the second month. I may continue a little bit longer. I'll see how I go. But yeah, I want to do this in a realistic way so that you can see what's possible with an hour a day. Okay, muchas gracias. Mucha cosa buena para este nuevo año. Muchas gracias. Y más importante, salud. Muchas gracias. Lo agradezco mucho y para ti también. Sigo aprendiendo más vocabulario en francés y a ver si logro subir nivel B2. Ahí, vaya, vas a alcanzar B2. A ver. Entonces, muchas gracias, let me see if I can read some of the questions. Hello from all over. Wow, thank you. Dobro večer. Nice to see you. Boa tarde. Hello from the US. The full trees in German and Spanish, but I had studied them before. I dabbled with other languages on Duolingo, but just for fun. Not my favorite method. No, I mean, it's not gonna be for everyone. It's probably not the most effective use of my time for studying, if I'm honest. At this point, I feel that maybe I could do more just by going through a course, like a book or something, and I'd probably have a more secure understanding and knowledge of the words and the vocabulary and the grammar behind it. And possibly I might get through more material, but at the same time, one thing I have found, aside from what I said about obviously some of the vocabulary I wouldn't prioritize at this stage, it does make me learn things quite a lot, like repeat things a lot before I go on to the next thing, which is good, because one of the issues that we have sometimes with books is that we can race through a book, like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, and nothing stops us. We just carry on, right, until we get to a point where we're like, oh, I can't understand what on earth this is now. I can't actually put this together in a sentence. And we don't really go back so often. So I always think it's important to remember that we're not machines, we're not computers, we're not robots. We do need to be reminded of things. We do need to refresh and to revise and to go back and to practice and to do things in a more, I guess, human way. And that's something that I think strangely with Duolingo, I'm forced to kind of finish things before I move on. And then it also reminds me to revise as well, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Look, I mean, I'm not going to start saying that I think that Duolingo is the best thing to use. Absolutely not. But there are some good things in it. It's, as I say, just possibly a little bit slow for the amount of time I put in and what I get out. It feels a bit slow sometimes, but yeah, I can see how it would be less appealing or more appealing to different people. I feel like French is really difficult to read because it's not phonetic. You're absolutely right. Do you have any advice on how to read French? I learned French when I was very young, so it's kind of something I just did. It does just take practice with French to sort of get the sounds and to get the correlation between how you write it and how you say it. I would probably suggest maybe looking at some, if you've already gone through quite a lot of French, or you've I'd suggest looking at things where you've got the written word and the spoken word at the same time, and read along. And the more you do it, the more you'll start seeing patterns in it. Maybe also note down things that were surprising to you in a book. Like have, for example, if there's a particular thing that you find challenging to pronounce, or something that you weren't expecting to be pronounced in a certain way, maybe write that down, and then see if, as you write words like that down, are there any patterns there that you can see. For example, I think the Ouille, for example, it can be a bit weird when you first see it. So I would say maybe focus on things like that, where you can maybe see patterns and things that, okay, maybe there is a way you pronounce this type of thing when you see it written. This is something that was suggested to me actually for Irish, and it's funny, you do start to see patterns as you go through, and I do find Irish still and Scottish Gaelic not so obvious for how I pronounce them. Sometimes they still surprise me. Let me see. Oh, with you were doing Japanese, John. Yeah, Japanese, I think for the writing particularly, probably would take, for a language like Japanese where you're writing, the writing system is so different, it maybe is quite good to spend a bit more time doing things like that as well. So I can see how you would just be using time just for things like that, whereas with Swahili, you don't have an issue with the writing and reading so much. It's more just the vocabulary, and you can get vocabulary overload. That's where you get to a point where you've seen so much, it just turns into a hot mess. But yeah, with a language like Japanese, I can totally see why you'd spend more time studying, because you've got to get used to the writing system as well as the vocabulary and the grammar. So it doesn't necessarily add more to the same areas of learning, if that makes sense. They're kind of almost like different skills, right? 2-hour commute. Wow. 2-hour commute. Okay. How do you deal with mixing up similar languages you're learning? I'm currently learning Spanish and French, and I'm having a bit of trouble with them. Spanish, okay, to separate them. So I think the really key thing that I found was always to focus on your pronunciation and focus on how very differently they pronounce words, because it's amazing how quickly, when you focus on the pronunciation and focus on speaking them back to back after a while as well, that it just feels wrong sometimes when you say something a different way. So making them as different as possible when you produce them is super important. Otherwise, it can be challenging. And will you get it 100% right 100% of the time? It's not so important to worry too much about that, because look, people make mistakes just in one language when they speak, and they get things wrong and they mix things up, and it's natural that will happen to a degree. But yeah, that's kind of how I tackle it, is focusing a lot on pronouncing things as differently as possible. Chanel, see, what's your ultimate goal for Swahili? Is to be able to speak it conversational level, intermediate level. Well, I don't really have a particular goal at the moment for Swahili, like long term, Chanel. It's just to take a month to see how the Duolingo course works, what I can achieve in a month using a reasonable amount of time during my normal day. And also with italki lessons. And I wanted to have the italki lessons available for everyone, so that anyone interested in learning Swahili, you can try it for, well, 10 lessons it will be in the end. I've just done lesson 7 today, so I've got 3 more lessons for sure. I may do a few more. And then the idea is that anyone can follow along and complete Duolingo, or at least get quite far through the course, and do what I do, and do that with the support free of charge. And then if you're interested in learning, I've included Glory's link in the videos as well, so you can even have Glory as your teacher. She's absolutely wonderful. She's very supportive, very positive, a very nice person. And then obviously the italki gave me the link from the conference that gives you $10 off, and you can use my name to get $5 extra for free. There you go. So you can sort of, that's sort of the goal with it. Much more than that, don't really have at the moment. I must say that I do want to carry on. I've really enjoyed doing Swahili. I've really enjoyed studying with Glory, and yeah, I'm kind of not looking forward to stopping. I don't know if I will be able to stop so easily, but I mean, I don't know how my time's going to work with work, projects, and study, and then having another language on top of the languages I already have. It may be a little bit difficult, particularly doing an hour a day. Might be, will not be so possible for me to do. I might be able to get it to do a few times a week to continue, and to maybe move forward a little bit, but in a very slow way. We'll see. I may even take it back again, when I have another break. So go back to Swahili. I've really enjoyed doing it. From what you've seen, Swahili is not that hard, but you have to do it every day with more resources than Duolingo. Luckily, I've been. It doesn't have 3 scripts now to write, so no, it doesn't. John, you're right. It's actually, no, it's not that bad. To say some basic things in Swahili is not that bad. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's getting there. It's getting there. How can you connect to Glory? Chanel, she's on italki. I'll send you the link if you. It's in the description of the videos that I've had, the Swahili lessons, but I can send you the link as well, as obviously because we're connected. Let me see if there are any questions here on Instagram. You're very welcome. I'm glad I could explain some things about what I do and the processes I go through. I think it's important to kind of be transparent about these things. And to be honest with you, I mean, I was talking to somebody recently, and I said, I'm in a kind of a fortunate position that I went through a lot of this language study before all of the internet thing and social media and whatever else. So I've kind of gone through a lot of this outside, and the languages that I've used for my work and for my life, really I learned away from all of this. So now what I get to do is just actually explore languages as I want to and when I want to and whatever I want to the level I want to. And I quite enjoy doing it. I actually quite enjoy doing I enjoy getting to the sort of the A2, B1 level, particularly because that's where it kind of feels quite magic when you start speaking. When you get past that, it does take quite a lot more effort to to sort of push yourself through into other topics that you wouldn't necessarily talk about. And I definitely feel that in some of the languages that I'm learning now. Okay, let me see. Com poder quedar personalment amb els meus amics poliglotes d'arreu del món. Amb els meus... No sé. Okay. No sé què és una mica difícil saber què vols dir amb la qüestió, però per a mi, amb els meus amics del món, si m'agrada molt no solament parlar amb ells, però també usar les llengües per a viatjar, també per a fer les reunions que faig en diversos lugares del món. Però ara és una mica difícil fer aquest amb el virus Covid, però espero fer una conferència en un país en el món, en Mèxic, per exemple, aquest any, però ja tinc que veure ara amb les possibilitats del món, amb les restriccions del virus i això. Do you think French will become the most widely spoken language? I don't know why it would, but I mean, I don't even know why it would. I don't know. I don't think so, but it feels like a political question, but I don't think so. I think French had its time as it kind of had it had a peak, didn't it? And then it started going down in terms of as a lingua franca, which is the idea of French, right? Who knows though? I mean, who knows? I don't think so, because I've seen there are some regions, and there's a country that actually gave up speaking French and moved to English a few years back. So I think the tendency is probably more towards English, if I'm honest with you. I think possibly there might be other languages that we'll see that will be more commonly spoken than as a lingua franca. But that might all change, but it's very difficult to guess what that will be. At the moment, I think English is still on its trajectory in terms of being studied and being sort of a lingua franca, because the particularly in Europe, this new Generation Z is really quite strong in English overall, a lot stronger than even the previous generations. So because of things like TikTok and other social media outlets and Twitch and gaming and all that kind of stuff, that you find that they come to English very often. Let me see. 10, okay. Best 10 minutes habit for language learning. So I think the best thing to do is to learn a lot. I think, like Professor Ugali mentioned in this video, as I said, is just doing something regularly and making a promise, even if it's a 5-minute promise. I do think that doing regular study sessions, if you want to feel that you're moving forward in your language learning, my experience has been at least 2, but better 3 sessions that are spread out during the week that you study like in quite a concentrated manner. Tends to work well for me. And then I do bits in between as well, like study, practice, whatever else, which may be shorter periods of time. But I find that I need to do at least that to move forward. in a way that I feel the difference. So there are other languages that I, for example, play with, and I don't spend that amount of time. Greek is one, and my progress in Greek is very slow. Like to get, into the more advanced levels of Greek, it's very, very slow. So I because I don't spend enough time on it, I find that I learn words, I see words, I understand words, and then I forget them, and they go out of my active use again because I'm not using them enough. It's a normal thing that happens, unfortunately. I'm trying to read this. So some of these are a little bit mixed, these questions. I can't quite pick them out. What would you do different in language if you went back 20 years ago? I'd probably tell myself not to worry about doing things because other people say that they're the right things to do necessarily. So you should stick to the things that you like doing. I mean, we have to take ourselves out of our comfort zones if we want to expand and grow in language, because otherwise we don't get exposed to certain types of vocabulary or structures or whatever. So okay, that's a given, and it's not always pleasurable to do that. But for example, if you don't particularly like, I don't know, if you don't like reading literature, for example, but you do enjoy reading about history or some other thing, do that. Don't read literature just because somebody else tells you to read literature. Do it because you want to, and choose something else. If you don't, choose something, because you're going to get the language that you want to use, right? And the conversations you want to have. If you don't like literature and you read about it, all you do is read stories in language because somebody told you that that's the best way to learn it. But then you don't actually talk about that in any language. Who are you going to talk to about something you don't want to talk about? Learn your language through, things that you enjoy. If that's saving the environment, or if it's cookery, or if it's dancing, or if it's music, or if it can be any sort of thing, really. Because there's going to be lots of materials to read on those topics. If it's architecture, you might like architecture. So you can focus on those things. You can then read like news to get a more balanced vocabulary, right, to talk about general things. But yeah, I mean, I always find that quite an interesting thing, that read what you enjoy. And that's kind of what I'd say. I kept getting told, why aren't you reading, I don't know, Don Quixote was whatever, in the original. So, well, that wasn't one of the books on my program. I didn't have to read it, and I didn't really. I mean, some people would if I just saw this big thick book and thought, I guess maybe one day in the future. But at the time when I was studying, I went and studied business in Spanish, and I studied contabilidad, bookkeeping, what's it called, accountancy, in Spanish, and I studied marketing in Spanish. I studied, very, very different things, but I didn't study Don Quixote, for example. I did study some literature in Spanish, but yeah, it's horses for courses. What interests you? If you like philosophy, read about philosophy. I'm sort of big on doing things that get you feeling guilty for not doing something that somebody else thinks that you should do is like totally pointless. And it's just negative energy that you end up conserving, and it impacts on how you can actually do what you need to do, which is learn the language. What effective methods? Okay. Effective methods for learning for immersion in vocabulary. Oh wow, yeah. I mean, to be honest, learning vocabulary. I mean, people swear by these, these apps where you have spaced repetition. I've used them from time to time. I find the most effective thing for me is actually just reading, speaking, practicing, listening. getting it wrong 100 times and then eventually getting it right, because it turns out that that is a word that I now need to use. And, I have at times also just had lists of words where I've learned them because they're not going to come up and they were important for me because I wanted to talk about them. So particular ones for me, for example, are like birds. I've mentioned this quite a few times, that I was very interested in knowing the different names of birds in certain languages, and I actually just got lists. I made lists of them and learned them, and I remember them because I naturally am interested in, when I see a bird, I'm naturally interested in naming it. So don't ask me why. I'm not a particular bird watcher, but I just am. Same with flowers and stuff. So I like to find out names of things. But yeah, it's a lot of it is sort of using memory techniques to try and remember things, trying to use hooks of memories of words that you already know, and trying to sort of make it as memorable as possible. But some memory techniques that you can see, I mean, I'm not going to go down the whole memory palace thing, because I think it can be a different skill in itself, remembering lots of lists of words. But actually incorporating some of those techniques into your language learning can be quite useful. So so things like, you know, making up stories, or the sounds of the words, or words they sound like in other languages that you speak, can help to just recall. Okay. Could I understand Estonian after learning Finnish? Are they similar somehow? Yes, they are similar. Can you understand it? I'm going to say no. They're similar, but I think that possibly not enough for you to understand everything. You'd understand something, of course, but not to like follow it in the same way as you would, for example, if you learned, I don't know, if you learned Slovak and Czech, they would be pretty, yeah, I mean, you can basically understand them a lot more easily than, say, Finnish and Estonian, I think. Particularly, it depends on this Finnish you learn as well. If you learn, because Finnish is kind of has a diglossia going on in terms of the written language and the spoken language are quite different with Finnish. And Estonian, so far in my experience with Estonian, it's felt like the way people speak and the way the language is written down there's that higher correlation of it's way more similar than, say, Finnish. Finnish was just, yeah, like a different language almost when you see it written down and when you hear it spoken, the formal Finnish and the colloquial Finnish. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there are similarities, but not necessarily. Even speakers of the language, you need to be exposed to the language for a while to understand each other. But you can get to it, absolutely. Okay. Let me see, the happiest moment related to languages, when you start speaking and using them and get sort of going through. I think that's one of the things that I really like, and I think that's one of the most addictive things, is when you start to use a language and communicate and make up your own sentences and make your own words. You sort of make your own words. Sorry, make your own sentences. You can actually make your own words as well in the language. It's quite fun. So I've definitely done that in a number of languages as well, where I've come across words that I've just combined or done something with, and it's not necessarily understood by everyone, but sometimes it is, and sometimes your friend group can take it on and that's happened as well, where I've had friend groups and they've taken on a word I've made up in the language because it sounded fun to me to change it or to do something to it, and then it became part of our kind of in-group dialect or something like that. Maybe it's like, yeah, I kind of have my own idiolect words in a few of the languages I speak, for sure. Let me see if I can see any other. My audio froze. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I didn't notice that. What solution or what advice do I have for a language that each gender has? Also, each noun has a grammatical gender. So sometimes, depending on the language, because it's a very, very different thing for each language, but some languages, you will see patterns. So finding the patterns is really important for gender. If there are not, then yeah, a little bit more complicated. There are a few things you can do. So some people have used the whole writing them down using different colors. So you, when you see them, you associate a color with the word as well. It just helps the memory, can help the memory to definitely learning the gender with the noun is important, and often the plural as well as the gender can be important. This is one of the things that people always said with German: learn the noun, the gender, and the plural form, because it makes it easier then later to see patterns. When you hear other words, you can see the patterns more easily. You get more of a feel for it. It takes time to get to that point, but there are 2 ways I would suggest that you do it. Of course, there are words that have a couple of genders. So sometimes a gender will change meaning. So yeah, you'll have like in French, le mémoire and la mémoire. One is memory, and the other one is your like thesis that you write. Your dissertation, I guess is the word, dissertation, and they will change meaning. Other words, for example, will have 2 genders. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember that in Italian the word for the end is la fine or il fine. I may be wrong, but I think it has both genders. In Macedonian, for sure, there is a word pesok, which is the word for sand, and it can be pesokta or pesokot, which is masculine or feminine. It can be either. So it's a choice for the speaker to decide what they want to use. And I hear both fairly regularly. So there are some nouns like that, but then you will also see patterns. For many Slavic languages, I think it's fairly obvious because of the certain endings that they have. For some languages like German or French sometimes as well, as I'm told, people find it quite complicated because it does feel a bit sort of random. But there are some rules even in those languages to sort of see these types of words, but then others you just have to remember. Spanish loanwords in Tagalog, and you probably never assigned a gender. Okay, yeah. Okay, I can't imagine knowing so many languages. So, wow, John, that's still a lot. It's really, it's like only. I love that you said that, but it's, yeah, 8 to 9 languages. It's a lot of languages to have and to maintain. You have to maintain them. This is the thing as well, right? So this is another reason why I will say to people, just because I do a language project doesn't mean I'm going to carry on with the language forever, because there might be other languages I want to sort of get to know and meet and sort of see how they work, and so just going crazy right to like a kind of like a B, even to a B1, B2 level, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you've then got to keep it up if you want to, because then what do you do if you don't speak it? It's quite complicated to sort of keep using these languages, which is why I tend to go for languages that are spoken close to me or around me, because I can naturally hear them and use them. Makes my life a lot easier doing that. Because I don't work for a linguistic environment as you. Percent of the time I speak in colloquial Romanian, and sometimes, yeah, if you're using them for work, it helps. Living in a multilingual environment helps a lot too. But yeah, I mean, we've got to be realistic. We're not machines. It's going to be English, Mandarin, Chinese, Arabic, Spanish, Brazilian, Portuguese, Japanese, and Korean. Wow, Chanel, that's one list of languages right there. Okay, is the connection Finnish and Estonian like German and Dutch? Possibly actually, yeah. That's quite a good parallel from what I've seen. So yeah, possibly German and Dutch. Hey, Yoga Bliss, yay! Nice to see you. Hi Richard, it was lovely to chat with you about language learning coaching, very empowering and uplifting. Thank you very much. It was so nice to talk to you too. You're absolutely delightful to talk to. Thank you. Dogs to the boys. What's that one? Okay. Right. Well, we've got to the hour. Thank you all so much for joining me and for keeping me company on today, the 2nd of January. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. I will finish my month of Swahili, and I will look to write a blog post to go with all of these updates that I'm doing. I will do another update on Swahili, but I will add something else to it as well. So if you have anything you want me to talk about particularly, then let me know. Otherwise, yeah, I will think of something, I'm sure. I have a lot of people asking me questions that always triggers something in my brain to talk about. And thank you so much for being with me. I wish you all the very best for your studies this year, and all the very best for 2022. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Happy language learning.